In a groundbreaking revelation that has captivated archaeologists, historians, and religious scholars alike,
Usually when we think about the Tower of Babel,
new evidence has emerged that could finally unlock the mystery behind one of the most enigmatic stories in the Bible, the Tower of Babel. This new evidence not only brings us closer to understanding the true nature of the Tower of Babel, but also challenges long-held beliefs about the intersection of history and scripture.
we think about the people building a tower to reach into heaven.
The legend of the Tower of Babel. Thousands of years ago, in a land far, far away, a group of people came together with one simple mission: to build a structure that will ascend from the earth to the hidden depths of the heavens. Some call it a legend, others say it's just a fictional story. But according to the biblical narrative, this was the moment when everything about human civilization changed forever. Genesis chapter 11 records this unforgettable moment in history, and it goes something like this. Now the whole world had one language and a common speech. As people moved eastward, they found a plain in Shinar and settled there. They said to each other, "Come, let's make bricks and bake them thoroughly." They used brick instead of stone and tar for mortar. Then they said, "Come, let us build ourselves a city with a tower that reaches to the heavens." For thousands of years, many archaeologists have attempted to answer one simple question: where is the Tower of Babel? Now, this recent discovery might actually put this mystery to rest once and for all. The clues, however, have been hidden in plain sight all along. You see, according to the Bible, there was a time when the whole world had one united language. What was this language? No one has really figured that out yet. However, this general language fostered an impressive level of unity among the people. Unfortunately, though, their collaborative spirit was about to be shattered, all thanks to a group of people who decided to migrate to a place called Shinar, or Lower Mesopotamia. It wasn't just their decision to explore new territories that caused the crisis, though. That was all thanks to their ambition to create a magnificent structure that would challenge the throne of God himself. It was an audacious project, but the people were of one mind, and they knew they could make it happen. The Bible records that these men and women began building this great city, and work was going pretty well for a while. The structures were coming together, the foundation of the tower was laid, and it was only a matter of time before they would reach up into the heavens and apparently touch God himself. Of course, this didn't sit well with God. For one, he knew that as long as they were united, his creations could actually pull this project off. So he had to take away that one thing they all had in common, which was their shared language. One day, while the men and women were building, someone spoke a new language no one had really heard before. It was strange at first, but then another person spoke yet another new language. Everyone became confused immediately, and the whole place was thrown into chaos. As expected, the project was eventually abandoned since the people couldn't communicate. But that's not where it ended, because now the world had changed drastically. Now there were hundreds, or maybe even thousands of languages. So the people began to separate and fulfill the mission God gave them in the first place, which was to multiply and dominate the world. However, they were no longer one people united under one tongue. Crisis began to arise, wars erupted, territorial disputes became a thing, and the rest, they say, is history. Now here's where things get a little complicated. You see, the phrase Tower of Babel doesn't exactly appear anywhere in the Bible. Instead, the scriptures refer to the structure as the city and the tower, or sometimes just the city. So why exactly does everyone call it the Tower of Babel? Well, according to experts, Babel is the Hebrew name for Babylon. This is why many people also refer to the building as the Tower of Babylon. However, the origin of the name itself remains an unsolved mystery. Some say the native Akkadian name of the city was Babelim, which means Gate of God. The biblical narrative claims that the word Babel came from the Hebrew verb balal, which means to jumble or to confuse. Of course, this would coincide with the idea that their languages were distorted and everyone became confused. But still, there are several arguments pointing to other origins of the name. Regardless of where the name came from, though, the story of the tower has become a symbol of pride. It represents humans' desire to be the main character even in the early days. Once our ancestors became aware of God's existence, they wanted to be exalted just as He was. Unfortunately, the book of Genesis doesn't exactly specify the height of the tower, so we don't know how far they really went with the project. However, there is an apocryphal text that might provide a clue. According to the Book of Jubilees, the Tower of Babel apparently stood at around 5,433 cubits and 1 palm. In today's standard unit of measurement, that's 8,150 feet, or around 2,500 meters. To give you a perspective of how tall it was, that's like stacking 3 Burj Khalifas on top of each other. On the other hand, there is another text called the apocryphal Third Apocalypse of Baruch, which tells a whole different story. According to this ancient scroll, the so-called Tower of Strife was 695 feet tall. An historian named Orosius also claimed that it was only 300 feet tall. Then there's Giovanni Villani, who wrote that the tower stretched into the skies for 3.68 miles. 14th century explorer John Mandeville disagreed with this, stating that it was only 8 miles high. Historian Verstegen argued that it was just about 4.7 miles tall, and Professor J.E. Gordon put the true figure around 1.3 miles. But while these experts have never agreed on a precise figure, at least they accepted that it was a real structure. Other scientists, on the other hand, believe that the entire story was fabricated. To find out what the truth really is, we must travel back to the ancient city of Babylon. Discovering ancient Babylon. Humanity has seen the rise and fall of many civilizations, but in the history of our species, very few epic tales can rival that of ancient Babylon. The story began around 2000 BC, when this powerful and advanced nation emerged as the center of Mesopotamian civilization. For almost 2,000 years, it remained the most influential city at the time. Gold was abundant. The city's economy was at the highest height, and Babylon had the strongest military force of that era. As for its location, the ancient city was supposedly built near the Euphrates River, some 60 miles south of Baghdad in modern-day Iraq. For a very long time, the Babylonian language was the standard means of communication in the Middle East. Its laws were also adopted across the region, and Babylon was basically a world power of its time. The people themselves were also very skilled and knowledgeable. As a matter of fact, the city produced scientists who made important discoveries in mathematics, physics, and astronomy. It was in Babylon that trigonometry was first developed, as well as the system for monitoring the change in Earth's rotation. While the city was initially founded as a small port on the Euphrates River, it quickly became one of the most powerful cities in the world, under a man named Hammurabi. It was Hammurabi who transformed Babylon into the rich, powerful, and influential city that we all know and love today. But beyond their scientific discoveries, the Babylonians were also known for their engineering marvels. These men loved to design and build beautiful and lavish buildings. This is where the story of the Tower of Babel intertwines with the history of Babylon. Because according to many experts, the builders may have taken inspiration from a Babylonian structure known as the ziggurat. Specifically the ziggurat built to honor Marduk, the patron god of Babylon. Going by the records in Genesis chapter 11, the people migrated to a place known as Shinar, or Lower Mesopotamia. This is the same region where Babylon was said to have existed back in the day. Coincidence? Definitely not. So since the story took place with a southern Mesopotamia backdrop, that sounds like a good place to begin our search for the ancient city. In addition, many experts have agreed that the tower may actually be a ziggurat. You see, back in the glory days of Babylon, these ziggurats were some of the most important structures in the city. In those times, it was common for the city planners to center the design of the areas around the ziggurats. As of today, about 30 ziggurats have been discovered in and around Mesopotamia. Some were found in Mari, some in Tel Brak, and others in Dur-Sharrukin, Ur, Eridu, Sosa, and Choga Zambil. Some of these step pyramids had stairs, others had ramps, and some even had both. Generally, the size of the ziggurats also varied. While some measured 20 meters on a side, others could be as big as 90 meters. In many cases, the step pyramid was dedicated to the city's patron god or goddess. However, while most cities had a single ziggurat, others like Kish had 3. The idea behind these structures was to get the people as close to their god as possible. They believed that the higher the temple was, the easier it was for men to touch God. Strangely, this was the same mindset that preceded the construction of the Tower of Babel. In addition, the ancient Babylonians viewed their ziggurats as man-made mountains. This was important because mountains often served as portals through which ancient men communicated with God. So the idea was to build a structure that will represent the natural monument where the prophets of old saw God face to face. For others, the ziggurat concept was meant to be a throne. This way, it could serve as both the dwelling place of the god as well as the platform on which he ruled his people. Other experts have also claimed that the ziggurat was the tomb of a king or a god, just like the Egyptian pyramids. For the priests whose job was to climb up these ziggurats, it was like ascending up to heaven. While the people waited at the bottom, the priests would ascend to the top structure, where they believed God lived. The stairway served as a portal, and the structure itself was highly revered by the people. But even outside of the biblical context, both Babylon and her ziggurats have been referenced in other texts. This includes both religious and historical texts, some of which are ancient and others relatively new. Among these ancient texts, however, there is one that might confirm that the Bible stories were actually 100% true: the Revolutionary Tablet. In 2017, archaeologists found an ancient inscription from around 604 BC. Carved on a black stone, this ancient text has become the oldest representation of the Tower of Babel ever found. The story begins with a Norwegian businessman named Martin Schoyen, owner of the largest private manuscript assemblage formed in the 20th century. With over 13,700 manuscripts in his collection, Schoyen's archive was a pot of gold. What no one expected to find, however, was the only surviving evidence proving that the Tower of Babel was real. While browsing through the pictographic and cuneiform tablets in the collection, Schoyen discovered something fascinating. It was a spectacular stone monument clearly showing the tower and a drawing of King Nebuchadnezzar II. Known as the first Babylonian king to rule Egypt, Nebuchadnezzar has a few records under his sleeves. For one, he's credited with the construction of the Hanging Gardens, one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. Historians also believe he built many temples all over Babylonia. However, among his many towering structures, there's one that has caught the attention of researchers for decades. This is the ziggurat known as Etemenanke. Standing at 7 stories tall and almost 300 feet high, Etemenanke is dedicated to the god Marduk. But for some biblical scholars, this was the actual Tower of Babel. To understand whether this is true or not, we need to carefully examine this infamous tablet. On it, you will find the standing figure of King Nebuchadnezzar II. He's depicted with his royal conical hat. He's holding a staff in his left hand, and there's a scroll in his outstretched right hand. On this scroll, you will find the rebuilding plans of the tower, or a foundation nail. Professor Andrew George studied this ancient inscription for a very long period. His findings form the foundation of what we know about the tower today from a scientific perspective. According to the archaeologist, the inscription depicts the tower from a front view, clearly showing the relative proportions of the 7 steps. This includes the Holy Temple at the top of the whole structure. On the stele, you will also find a line drawing the ground plan of the temple. There you will see details of the outer walls as well as the inner arrangement of rooms. In addition, the caption also clearly identifies the tower as the Great Ziggurat of Babylon. Then there's the message inscribed by King Nebuchadnezzar himself, which Professor George translated saying, "I made it the wonder of the people of the world. I raised its top to the heaven, made doors for the gates, and I covered it with bitumen and bricks." Historians also believe that the construction took 43 years of labor. Others also believe that it took at least 17 million bricks to build the tower. Some of these bricks had inscriptions written in cuneiform, and a couple of them that survived have become known as the Tower of Babel bricks. On the other hand, some researchers have argued that the interpretation made by Professor George wasn't entirely accurate. Due to the challenges of interpreting lost languages, sometimes some facts get lost in translation. But thanks to modern technology, we can now easily understand ancient messages embedded in their artifacts. But how does this inscription align with the Bible stories? Is Etemenanke truly the same as the Tower of Babel? Corroborating the biblical account. The best way to confirm whether Etemenanke and the Tower of Babel represent the same structure is to do a side-by-side comparison. As explained earlier, the name Babel is considered to be the same as Babylon, the name of the city. Then there's the fact that the Tower of Babel was erected in Shinar, located in Mesopotamia. According to the Septuagint, Shinar can also be translated as Babylonia. So it seems the two structures may have more than a few things in common. However, one of the most convincing pieces of evidence is the translation of the name of the Babylonian structure itself. Experts believe Etemenanke means the house of the foundation of heaven on earth. Sounds like a bizarre coincidence, doesn't it? Could it be possible that the Tower of Babel wasn't actually inspired by the temple of the god Marduk? And instead, it is actually the real Etemenanke. Of all the ziggurats that have been located across ancient Babylon, Etemenanke is one of the largest and inarguably the most important. Marduk, the god it was built to honor, was a chief deity in Babylonian culture. Legend says he once defended the other gods against a monster known as Tiamat. After killing the monster, he then brought order to the cuneiform cosmos. Then he built a monument known as the Esagila, which was the center of the New World. Once this was done, he then created mankind. At least that's how the story goes. To worship and thank him, the people built a massive temple. The Etemenanke was supposedly situated next to another building known as Esagila. This means that it was located at the very center of the world, serving as the axis of our universe. Beneath the structure, there is a straight line that connects the earth to heaven, just like the people in Genesis said, "Let us build a tower whose top may reach unto heaven." Away from all of that, there's also a strange similarity between the designs of the two towers. According to a description from an ancient Uruk tablet, written in 2029 BC, Etemenanke was made up of 7 terraces. All of the 7 stalks measured about 91 meters. The ground floor was around 91 by 91 meters, as confirmed by archaeologist Robert Coldaway. There are also large stairs on the south side of the building. It's at this section of the building that the triple gate connecting Etemenanke with Esagila is located. There's a larger gate in the east, connecting the tower with the sacred procession road. Looking at Etemenanke from the triple gate, historians believe it truly looks like the stairway to heaven. This is because the gates on the higher terraces appear to be standing on top of each other. Also, the methods used in constructing the two buildings seem quite similar. According to records, Etemenanke was built using sun-dried mud brick from the center outward. It was then faced with kiln-baked brick, before it was ornamented and painted. On the other hand, Genesis chapter 11 records that the tower was made from bricks that were baked thoroughly. According to archaeologists, this was a common construction material at the time, especially in places where wood or stone was scarce, just like in Mesopotamia. Adding to the list of overwhelming evidence, Etemenanke was also built during a time of mass migration. It was a place where a group of people decided to settle down, and as the Bible describes it, make a name for themselves. Nebuchadnezzar, who's credited for creating this monstrosity, was traditionally a builder and restorer. He took pride in planting several massive structures across Babylon. He's been called the greatest and most prestigious king of the Neo-Babylonian Empire, thanks to his war conquests and architectural marvels. Under his reign, the ziggurat became a symbol of the Babylonian culture. So could it be possible that he also commissioned the Tower of Babel? The Ziggurat of Babylon versus the Tower of Babel. Unlike the biblical Tower of Babel, the construction of Etemenanke was completed. Its walls truly reached into the heavens, and it served as a place of worship for many years. But in the year 331 BC, when Alexander the Great captured Babylon, he found the building in disrepair. So he ordered the engineers to restore it to its former glory. However, By the time he returned in 333 BC, no progress had been made on the project. Out of disappointment, Alexander ordered his army to demolish the entire building in order to prepare for a final rebuilding. Unfortunately, his death prevented the reconstruction. What's left of the building is currently located 56 miles south of Baghdad in Iraq. However, in its glory days, the Etemenanki was more than just a huge building. At the top level, there are sections designated as motel rooms for the gods. This particular floor was full of luxurious bedrooms, each filled with the finest beds they had to offer, bearing the names of the gods they expected to spend the night there. One of these rooms was designated for Marduk and his wife Sarpanitum, and another for Nabu and his wife Tashmetu. Others were specially built for the gods of water, light, and heaven. But that's not even the strangest part. Above the top level, you will find a temple. But unlike other temples, this one only contained a couch and a table made of pure gold. Only a woman chosen by Marduk as his wife was allowed to visit the room. It was the duty of the priests to inform the woman she had been selected by the god Marduk. After a couple of rituals, she would then be sent up the stairways to wait for the god to show up. While no one really knows what goes on up there, many of the selected women claim they made love to God himself. Over the years, several commentators have confirmed that the Tower of Babel and Etemenanki are just interchangeable names. Some cling to the proximity of their locations as proof. Others believe that since both were built so men could ascend to heaven, they must definitely be the same. Then there are those who believe that since the Tower of Babel is likely a ziggurat, there's a very chance it was built by Nebuchadnezzar II. Experts believe that the location was the actual cradle of civilization, which sprang up from nowhere some 6,000 years ago. This coincides with the account in Genesis. Others also claim that since the people were descendants of Noah, then they probably learned about God from him. There are also several archaeological evidence proving that the builders of Babel scattered throughout the world around the same period. Unfortunately, though, it's hard to speak with utmost certainty when these structures have been totally destroyed many years ago. Built from mud brick, ziggurats like the Babel Tower were not made to stand the test of time. Unlike other building materials, mud brick is very susceptible to erosion. Wind, rain, and the relentless assault of the elements easily expose their surface, leading to the loss of intricate design details. When you combine this with the harsh desert sun, you create a condition where architectural marvels would slowly wither away. Added to that is the human activities, which is still the greatest threat. Imagine if Alexander the Great never ordered the ruins to be completely removed. Imagine if the other leaders who tried to rebuild the structure eventually went through with it. Unfortunately, none of them did, and now only an imprint of the structure remains as proof that it once towered over the earth. The broader implications. The Bible contains some of the most disputed stories ever told, but this one might actually lend credibility to the others. If the Tower of Babel turns out to be the same as the Babylonian pyramids, it could change everything we've ever believed about our history. While the biblical narrative is often considered infallible, theories still about this particular case may be quite different. Or perhaps our understanding of the story is just flawed. On the other hand, the story represents how God truly despises the pride of man. It showcases the rare occasion when God makes a decisive decision over his creations, bringing an instant judgment upon them. However, science and religion have been on polar opposites many times. While the Christian community believes the two towers are not the same, scientists say otherwise. Whatever the truth may be, discussions continue behind the scenes about these two structures. Could we eventually stumble on a discovery that will answer all our questions? No one can really say for now, but considering how the world of archaeology constantly evolves, the Tower of Babel may eventually emerge from the earth one day. Maybe then, both theologians and archaeologists will finally come to a consensus on this case. Exploring other ziggurats. Although Etemenanki or the Tower of Babel is still the most famous ziggurat in the world, it's not the only one that was ever built. Just like the Egyptian pyramids, Ziggurats were scattered all over modern-day Iran and Iraq. One of the largest and best-preserved versions is known as the Great Ziggurat of Ur. It was around the turn of the 20th century when excavation was first done on this particular site. Then, in the 1920s, an archaeologist known as Sir Leonard Woolley took things a step further. In a joint project with the University of Pennsylvania Museum in Philadelphia and the British Museum in London, Woolley unveiled the ancient monument in its full glory. Under the cover, the archaeologist found a huge rectangular structure resembling a pyramid. It measured 210 by 100 feet meters. The Ziggurat of Ur was also constructed with 3 levels of terraces. Historians believe it originally stood between 70 to 100 feet. There are also 3 massive staircases leading up to a gate at the first terrace level. In addition, there's also a single staircase rising to a second terrace. Just like the Tower of Babel, the core of the Ur Ziggurat is made of mud brick, coveted with baked bricks laid with bitumen. Then in Uruk, now known as Warka in Iraq, there's another structure known as the Anu Ziggurat. Dating back to the late 4th millennium BC, the step pyramid was dedicated to the sky god Anu. In its glory days, the structure stood at around 40 feet tall. It was so tall that you could see it from a distance, even over the defensive walls of the city. It was on the ruins of this ziggurat that the White Temple was eventually built. So why exactly did we stop building ziggurats in the first place? Well, short answer, we found a better way to build. Long answer, our understanding of engineering improved over the years. We moved from thick walls to large windows. Most people stopped believing in the ancient gods and eventually stopped building houses in their honor. The civilizations that promoted these designs died out over time, and they just became forgotten. Today, these structures remind us of what used to be and the cultures that once ruled our world. The symbolism of the Tower of Babel. For many years, expert historians have tried to find out if the Tower of Babel was ever real. But what if they were asking the wrong questions, and the answers have been right in front of them the whole time? Yes, the tower's architecture is impressive, but what if it was more of a symbol of human pride? Many believe the Tower of Babel is a metaphor, representing man's hunger to be part of something greater. However, what displeased God about the structure wasn't the building itself. It wasn't the materials that were used or how tall it was. It wasn't even about the location. What God despised was the intention behind the construction in the first place. Could a man build a structure that would reach the very throne of God? Realistically, no. But the very idea that mortal men wanted to exist on the same plane as their Creator was bold and audacious. And not in the good kind of way. It was more of an act of rebellion from a people who just recently survived a flood. Disobedience has been a part of human nature from the very start, and God sought a way to keep people in check. So the language was changed, and the tower was left incomplete, as a sign that man's ambition must never be to be as great or greater than God. Over the years, there have been several depictions of the tower in art, movies, books, and other mainstream media outlets. Famous novelist Douglas Adams once wrote a novel titled The Babel Fish. The composer Anton Rubinstein also wrote an opera based on the story Der Turm zu Babel. In 1993, American choreographer Adam Darius staged a play titled The Tower of Babel at the ICA in London. There have also been several films like Fritz Lang's Metropolis, released in 1927. In addition, Babel has made an appearance in video games, art pieces, and a host of documentaries digging for the truth. Today, its legacy is forever etched in stone and will likely remain so until the very end of time. Thank you for watching. See you in the next one.